What's happening, everybody? Good evening, and welcome to the Beehive. Buzz, buzz. Welcome, drones and everybody else. Is this thing starting? Is it live? Yes, it is. Okay, we're up and running. Good. Hello, and good evening, and welcome to the Beehive. It is Apocalypse Hump Day, and it is night. Holy crap! Where are we at now? We're night 16, I believe. Yes, we've been doing this for a while, and we have covered everything from alien invasions to government takeovers and the like. So we are currently on the zombie saga, and it is a saga because it's we're going through my zombie novel. Hey Chuck, how we doing? It's good to see you, buddy. As always. Um, we're going through my book Zechariah 14:12, Humanity's Last Stand, a book I published back in 2012, and I have a link here on the video if you guys want to are interested in purchasing it or want to tell somebody about it. It's free on Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, $5.99 if you want to buy it, and it is $10.99 on paperback there from Amazon. And I see that, yeah. So if you're interested in it, I got the linkity link on the page here. Just look down. And so I hope you guys enjoyed my little interview with my friend Jim West. He and I have watched so many zombie things together, and he's usually got some commentary throughout the whole thing. It's almost like watching a football game. Hey, good evening, Kevin. Good to see you, buddy. Um, yeah. So anyhow, yeah. So we did that. I did edit the video for that. I cut off the part where I rambled on the wrong chapter, and I got cut off. So I edited it so it's just the interview, and we just kind of counted that as a Apocalypse Hump Day special. And we're getting caught up tonight, and that is why I'm reading two chapters in order so nobody gets screwed up. I know my friend Joe Saul, who follows this podcast at work, and he was kind of kerfluffled, he said, because he said, oh, now it's out of order. Now I'm going to be thinking about one story, and it's going to be leading to another, and it's going to be all wrong. So, Mr. Pimo, this is for you. Anyhow, also, we were having some mic problems last night at Tunes for Tuesday, and Kevin was not able to hear me very well. And I figured out the reason for that. It wasn't because I broke the mic. It was because, kind of embarrassed to say this, it was because I had the mic facing the wrong way. It was faced outwards towards you, not towards me. So I'm hoping tonight this is coming through a little clearer for you, Kevin. So, sorry about that. Again, I shared a post earlier today, and it was the science guy that blows things up and starts things on fire and always shocks himself. Anyway, I put me doing my podcast for you guys. Anyhow, so we're getting it all figured out eventually. So had a lot going on. I've had some new people move in with me, and then they in turn have moved on to their new destination. So it's been kind of a lot of adjusting and everything, and just side stuff going on. And I really, my heart wasn't really into this. Yeah, that should be my nickname, Kevin. Wrong way, Brad. So, anyhow, yeah, my mind has just been concentrating on other things, and so tonight is the night that we put things back to where they're supposed to be, put back in order, and all that. And I have a beautiful cup of Bustelo espresso to get me there. I keep saying that because I'm hoping they'll let me plug them they can pay me some advertising. Anyway, so getting back into the apocalypse here, Zechariah, the last time I read the right chapter, the president was watching shit hit the fan in his country, and he was running out of choices to make, and so he decided with his chiefs of staff that the only solution was a nuclear solution, and they were going to begin bombing the bigger cities in the United States to lessen the numbers of infected out there. And we left it at that. So, in the meantime, Len and his girls are holed up in the attic of an old pioneer farmhouse. The reason they're in the attic, excuse me, the reason they're in the attic is because they had a visitor come over and he pounded the hell out of Len with a sledgehammer. And they ended up feeding that kid to the zombies. And now the zombies are roaming around in the house. So they're kind of holed up in the attic right now. And, yeah. So, and Kris Emerson, his wife and mother of his children, she is holed up at Hal Iverson's house. She just had her legs sawed off with a reciprocating saw. Because she got bit there, and the infection was getting worse. So, anyhow, that's everything up to date now. And now let's jump into chapter 13. Lucky 13. They were eating a can of peaches when the rumbling started. "Dad?" Lee was the first to speak up. "What is that?" They had been holed up in the attic of the old pioneer farmhouse for what Len guessed to be about 2 days. Whenever they thought it was safe to venture down the ladder to check on a few things, a few of the infected would come from a room or up the steps. When it was quiet, the infected would just stand there with their heads cocked to the side and staring off into space. They didn't have much left for food. Len was only able to grab a few things. The rest of it was in his black duffel bag sitting in their safe room. He knew he would need to find a way out soon, but he needed to heal. The blow he took to the stomach with the sledgehammer had damaged his insides. He was bleeding inside. He could feel it and taste it. His tongue had an insistent coppery tang to it. They were playing a game of 20 questions when the rumbling began. At first it sounded like a giant roar from some ancient prehistoric beast. At this point, Len was willing to believe in anything. But it was getting louder and the walls were beginning to vibrate. "I'm not sure, Lee," Len said, a little shaky. Lee and Catherine crawled up next to him. It was unnerving because now they could feel the vibration all the way through the house and into their very bones. But there were no windows in the attic, so they had no idea what was going on outside. A deafening eruption shook the house and blew some of the roofing off, letting in the light from the blast. The sound echoed in their heads, leaving a high-pitched squeal in their ears. Len could hear his kids scream, but it was muffled out by the roar of the explosion. The impact threw them around like rag dolls, and the force of the explosion singed their blown-back hair. Shrapnel ripped through the boards of the old house, ripping apart the infected that were roaming the halls. Some of it nearly hit Lee and Catherine. When the blast had passed, Len gathered up his girls and then felt the house begin to teeter. "Hang on, kids," he said, trying to put his whole body around them. The old supports gave way and the floor they were huddled on sank into the next floor. Still gripping his daughters, Len got on his feet with a shotgun ready. There were corpses, but they were lying still on the ground, some of them ripped apart by the blast. "Come on, guys," he said to them. "We need to get out of here. The building isn't safe." "But our supplies," Lee said. "We'll have to leave them. Come on." They made their way out of the rubble of the house. There weren't any infected left standing after the blast. He could feel heat coming from the direction of the armory. He looked around and started to rush himself and the kids down the hill of Heritage Square and across the road into the Hobo Trail woods. As they were making their way down, he looked in the direction of the armory. A large plane had fallen from the sky. It was a military plane, and it hit the ground nose first. He began to think about all the planes that were in the air when this all started, and how there may be more coming down at any moment in any place. He shivered as he looked up into the sky. The Hobo Trail led out onto a floating sidewalk that went along the channel that connected Apex Lake with Gibbous. Len avoided the trail because there were boats trapped in this channel too, but the people on board these vessels were infected, growling and moaning to themselves and each other. He didn't want them alerting others of their arrival, so he headed into the woods. They found themselves in a shallow ravine. It was here that hobos used to come and camp. There were piles of ancient tin cans discarded from them. Railroad tracks loomed on either side, and deep woods to their left and right. "Where are we going to go, Dad?" Catherine asked. "I don't know yet, honey." He looked around. "But we've got to find shelter. Let's keep going." They went up the hill ahead of them and stopped at the tracks. Beyond the edge of the woods was an old road that had been closed long before any of this happened. It was an old service road to the cemetery. "A cemetery, Dad? Really?" Lee gasped. "It'll be okay, honey. I know it's not the nicest place in the world, but we can stay in one of the mausoleums." "I am not going in a mausoleum," Lee protested. "Me neither," Catherine joined in. "Look, you two, it'll just be for the night. Then we'll look tomorrow for something better." "Dad, they're dead in there," Lee pointed out. "And we'll be dead out here, Lee." "But isn't that where zombies come from?" Len let out a deep sigh and tried not to laugh at his oldest. "Honey, these aren't zombies. At least, not like the ones in the movies." "They're rotting, Dad, and they're eating people. How is that not a zombie?" "But they started out alive, Lee. This is some kind of virus that doesn't necessarily kill the person. It just infects them and turns them into, well, whatever they are now." "Do you promise that no zombies will get us in there?" "I promise that nothing will come crawling out of the ground to get at you or your sister." "Pinky swear, Dad," Catherine demanded. With the pinky swear initiated, the three of them walked to the edge of the woods and climbed the fence to the cemetery. "I don't know about this, Dad," Lee whispered. "It's awfully quiet." "Look, over there." Len pointed to a shed that sat up on a small hill. "There's a maintenance shed. No bodies buried in there." Lee and Catherine both felt some relief. They approached the shed and looked in one of the windows. The shop was empty except for a front loader and a riding lawnmower. "Okay," Len whispered as they approached the front door. "Come on." The door, of course, was locked. Len used the butt of the shotgun and hammered away at the doorknob until the knob came off. He slowly opened the door, motioning for his kids to keep back until he gave them the all clear. It smelled like a garage would smell: grease and oil, lawn clippings, and even a distant hint of cigarette smoke. Len grabbed a long screwdriver from the workbench and his own hammer and hammered the screwdriver through the hole where the doorknob was and into the door jamb. He then grabbed some tarps that were folded on a shelf above the workbench and used them to cover the 3 windows of the shed. "Hey, Dad, there's food," Lee spoke up. "Shh," he shushed and walked over to her. There was a mini fridge. Inside were 4 cans of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, 2 bottles of grape soda, a package of bologna, a hunk of pepper jack cheese, chip dip, and 3 sticks of beef jerky. Len immediately grabbed a beer and then gave his kids a bottle of water to split. He divided the beef jerky into thirds and they each had a share. "Can I have some cheese, Dad?" Lee asked. "We better save it, kiddo. I don't know when we're going to run into food again." She got a sour look on her face, but finishing up the beef jerky, Len gave in and cut a hunk of cheese off for both his girls. "Are you getting drunk?" Catherine asked. He smiled. "No, Kath. Not off of one beer." Len grabbed a black plastic lawn bag and filled it with the food and beverages they had found and placed it near the door. The silence out there was almost deafening. There were no birds chirping and no sounds of vehicles running or people or trains or sirens. Just silence. He figured what a nice place to put a cemetery. "You guys doing okay?" Len asked. "I guess so," Catherine answered. "Dad," Lee spoke up, "is it ever going to get better?" Len sat silent for a moment. "I wish I could tell you what you want to hear, Lee. I'm sure the government is trying everything in their power to get a grasp on the situation, but will we ever see Mom again?" "Yeah," Catherine spoke up. "When are we going to see Mom?" "I sure hope so, guys," Len said, uncertain. "This town is small enough that if she got to a safe zone, we'll see her there." They both began to cry. He tried to comfort them, but they both lost their grandma, lost their lives, their security, and now possibly their mom. He let them cry it out. They were sobbing for about 10 minutes when they heard a bang on the large garage door. Both kids stopped crying immediately and sniffled in their sobs as quietly as they could. "Dad," they whispered. "Shh." Len silenced them and walked over to the garage door to get a better listen. He heard shuffling on the other side, like someone dragging their feet through gravel. A moan, sad and hollow, came from its owner. Len followed the shuffling along the front of the shed to the door where it stopped. He pumped the Mossberg and crouched down to peek out the hole where the doorknob was. A rotted hand tried to grab the absent knob. A growl of frustration came from its mouth as it tried it again. Its nailless fingers wiggled around in the hole. Len stood up and walked quietly to his kids. "Get on top of the tractor," he whispered to them. "High up, into the scoop." Quietly they climbed the front loader, and then he handed the plastic lawn bag up to them. He could see silhouettes of the infected through the tarps he had put over the windows. Thankfully, they were walking past. He was hoping they all would gather at the door and try to help their comrade open the door. It was only held shut by that long, shanked screwdriver. But they tried for the garage door instead. It was only a thin layer of fiberglass, and depending on how many were out there, it would cave in fast. He looked into the cab, and the keys were in it. He climbed up and turned the ignition and waited for the glow plug to go out. There were so many buttons and levers, and the words that labeled them were either covered with grease or they were worn off. The light went out. He pressed the clutch, turned the key, and pumped the gas. The front loader roared to life. The group of infected was bending the garage door inward. It would be giving in at any moment. "Get down," he yelled out to his kids. "Get down, inside the bucket." He shoved it into first gear and let off the clutch. It pushed forward, and the bucket, with his kids in it, busted open the garage door, sending some of the infected flying and crushing some under the big tractor tires. He pulled on one lever, and it almost dumped his kids right on top of the hungry cluster. They screeched, which seemed to drive the infected even more insane. He quickly pushed the lever back and tried a different one. The hydraulics kicked in and raised the bucket high above the cab. He punched it into second gear and crushed several undead on his way to the front gate of the cemetery. There were two of them that had climbed onto the tractor and were trying to get into the cab. He opened the door and knocked one of them off, and then shut and locked the cab door again. The remaining one was smearing its rotted flesh and blood all over the windscreen, making it hard to see. He knocked over a few tombstones, but it made it through the front gate. He made a hard right and onto the railroad tracks. He knew they led near the Moon Valley Fairgrounds. That's where the last known safe zone was rumored to be. When Len got far enough away from the infected that were chasing them, he parked the front loader and got out. He tried to get his passenger with his hammer, but the thing grabbed his forearm and almost bit it. When he jerked his arm back, his hammer went flying into the tall grass. He watched it fall with some remorse. It had been his original weapon when all this began. It was trying to reach him from the other side of the open door, its rotting teeth snapping at him from the opposite side of the plexiglass. He could hear his girls crying from the bucket above his head. Holding the door open with his left foot, he reached back into the cab and grabbed the shotgun. He pressed the barrels into its snapping maw and pulled the trigger. He shut the tractor off and then shouted up to his girls. "You guys okay?" he asked. Their sobbing answered him back. He turned the key again and then lowered the bucket. He looked around to make sure there were no more of those hungry things and then climbed into the bucket with his girls. "Shh," he tried to comfort them. He checked to make sure there were no cuts or scratches on them. "It's okay, girls. We got out. We got away." The plane crash wasn't far away. The ash from the explosion was coming down gently like snow. They were all covered with dirt and soot the way it was. They would only get dirtier. He could hear the moans and growls of the infected from far away. "We better go, kids," he said. "We're almost to the safe zone. Hopefully Mom will be there." Lee stopped sobbing, but was gasping to catch her breath. Can we ride in there with you?" "Of course," he said, standing them up. "Come on, I'll help you." And that is the end of chapter 13. So we're actually getting up pretty close to the part where the short story of this book that started everything. We're getting pretty close to that part. I'll let you guys know when that happens. And now, chapter 14. We'll be joining Kris and her crew. "What the hell was that?" Brent screamed from the basement apartment. There was a loud rumbling and then an explosion that shook the entire block. Some of the windows broke and rattled some of the photos off the wall. A few car alarms went off down the block. "It was an explosion," Kris hollered back. "I think something crashed, like an airplane or something big." "It was a stratotanker," Hal said glumly, coming down the steps. "I heard the conversation on the radio. They were filling the tank on Air Force One, I think." "Jesus," Brent said, coming up the steps to the main floor. They all sat there quietly for a moment, waiting for the next thing to happen. "I guess we should be happy that there's communication going on over the air." Kris broke the silence. "Hal," Brent spoke up, "any news about safe zones?" "I heard some scrambled chatter about the Moon Valley Fairgrounds," Hal said, "but it was so choppy I couldn't make out what they were saying. It was like an open call to any survivors." "Well, you keep trying," Brent ordered, "but don't give out our location. Dealing with these Rack V deadheads is bad enough. We don't need marauders trying to steal everything of ours." "I'm not sure how long the generator is going to last," Hal said doubtfully. "I filled it last winter when we had a blizzard, and I haven't checked it since. Do what you can, man." Kris went upstairs on her good leg. It was painful, and she could feel the faint pain of her cauterization hidden behind her morphine. She got to the top landing and hobbled over to the apartment that went out to the balcony Hal was standing on. She opened the French doors and walked out and was immediately hit with the stench of rotting meat. She could hear the moans and growls of the deadheads below. She winced and then walked to the railing to look out over the neighborhood. People from every walk of life were out there. Only they weren't people anymore. They were shambling blindly from yard to yard. If she had to listen to their groans constantly, she would surely go mad. A little girl, about the age of Catherine, was following a group of them. She had mottled gray skin and her right eye was missing. Her dress was dirty and torn as if she'd been attacked. Kris began to cry, thinking of her own kids, mother and husband. "Damn it, Len," she thought to herself as she began to sob. "You had better be taking good care of our girls." To the northwest, she could see where the plane had crashed. Black, oily clouds plumed into the darkening sky. Even from 3 miles away, she could see the ash falling like snow. She didn't know that Len, Catherine, and Lee were just on the other side of that explosion, making their way down the railroad tracks to the Moon Valley County Fairgrounds. "Everything okay?" Brent asked from the doorway. She took a deep breath and looked back at him. "Yep. Those things are all over the place now, aren't they?" he said as he walked up to her side. "Looks that way." The little girl had made her way to the middle of the street without the group she was with. Just then, they both heard a car coming down the woodlawn. It was one of those foreign models with the modified muffler made to look and sound like a race car. They both looked at each other. "Oh my God!" Kris realized that the deadhead little girl was in the path of the car. "Kris," Brent tried to sound comforting, "she's not alive anymore." "She's just a little girl," she shouted out to her, and the other deadheads in close proximity of the house began to look for them. It was a Honda Civic. The windows were tinted and the bass inside was booming. Judging by the way the car was driving and the music coming from it, Brent assumed they were teenagers. "Those idiots," he said under his breath. "They're just attracting more attention." At that moment, the little girl growled at the approaching car as it struck her. She flew 6 feet into the air, and a leg flew off from her decaying body. Kris grimaced, and then when the car came to a large group of infected, it tried to plow through. Several bodies flew in the air like the little girl did, but the sound of crumpling fiberglass and then shattering glass stopped the roar of the car's engine. As a crowd of hungry deadheads began to advance on the wreck, 4 teenagers, 2 boys and 2 girls, emerged dazed from the accident. The bass still thudded from the subwoofers in back. A tall kid, maybe 17, swung a bat at one of those things. He was quickly overpowered, and the group on him tore him apart as if he were a care package landing in the middle of Ethiopia. Both girls screamed and ran frantically with the surviving boy. "Over here!" Kris yelled. "Run!" Brent was going to silence her, but it was too late. They heard and saw her and began making their way to the front yard. The remaining boy was swinging what looked like a giant machete at the advancing deadheads. He connected with a few, lobbing off a grasping limb or two. "Jesus, Brent, they need help," Kris said, trying to turn herself around on her one good leg. "God damn it," he muttered and leapt over the railing. He sprayed the yard with rifle fire. Heads exploded and bodies fell as the kids tried to make their way to the house. Brent met them halfway. "Keep going towards the latticework near the porch." Something that was lying on the grass with a superficial wound grabbed at a passing girl's ankle and knocked her down. "Brittany!" the other girl screamed. "Help me!" Brittany screeched. The infected crawled up her quarry and bit into the meat of her shoulder blades. Brittany yelled out in pain as the female deadhead ripped a chunk of flesh from her. Blood spattered its face, and it greedily gobbled up the meat it had in its mouth. Other deadheads began to gather around Brittany. "Get up to that porch, damn it!" Brent yelled. "She's dead!" He pushed them forward and helped them up the latticework to the porch where Kris awaited them. Brent was the last one up, and then 3 hands had grabbed his right boot with a chorus of roars. He was too odd of an angle to use his gun, so he grabbed his knife and swung it at an arc and hit one of those things dead in the eye. The other 2 hands were pulling on him so hard the thin latticework broke and he fell into a heap on top of the 2 remaining deadheads. He struggled to his feet, swinging the knife and catching one of them in the temple. He placed his boot on its head and struggled to pull it out of its skull. The other one tackled him down, jaws snapping, famished for his skin. His arms were pinned, but as the thing on top of him began to descend on his face, he heard a loud crack, and a hole immediately opened up in the thing's forehead, spattering his own face with its brains. He threw it off and looked up. Hal was leaning out the top window with a .45 smoldering from the barrel. Brent nodded to him a thank you and began climbing up the lattice before any more could grab at him. The next hand to grab him was Kris's. He smiled, and she returned a slight grin as she helped him over the railing. Brent looked up at Hal. "Thanks, buddy." "Just paying you back," Hal smiled and then went back to his radio. "Are you kids okay?" Kris asked them as they both were half sobbing and half panting. "Brittany," sobbed the girl. "Travis." "Where did you guys come from?" Brent asked. "Brittany and Kyla were working at Hy-Vee grocery store," the boy spoke up, catching his breath. "Kyla texted me to come and get them." "Dave's my boyfriend," Kyla broke in, sniffling. "Brittany and I were working the overnight. She was helping stock shelves and I was cleaning the registers. It was really slow that night. Then a few of those things came in. And we didn't notice them at first, only that, well, they moved kind of weird. That's when they attacked one of the maintenance guys who was cleaning the floor. They just ripped him apart and kept biting him. And then Brad, the store manager, he went over to go help and he was attacked. We tried to call 911, but the lines were busy. We couldn't even use our cell phones. The only thing that worked was texting. And that's how we got a hold of Travis and Dave." "We were fishing," Dave spoke up, "by the old dam. We hadn't run into any of those things until we got the text from the girls." "Didn't you hear anything on the radio?" Kris asked. "No, I don't ever listen to the radio. I always have a CD or my MP3 playing." "Brittany and I locked ourselves in the walk-in cooler until they arrived," Kyla added. "That place had at least 20 of those things in there when I arrived," Dave said, lighting a cigarette. "If we didn't have our softball bats with us in the trunk of the car, I don't know how we would have gotten to them. Although we did nail a couple of uninfected people. It was hard to tell some of them apart." "Are you kids hungry?" Kris asked. "Yeah," they both kids agreed. Dave looked down at Kris's missing leg. "What happened to your leg? It looks fucked up." "I got bit in the calf. I had to cut it off before the infection spread." "Damn." Kris took them downstairs to get something to eat. Hal was on the ham radio, running back and forth through the dial, trying to catch radio traffic. Apparently, Air Force One, president on board, was running dangerously low on fuel. There were several reports of aircraft falling from the sky due to loss of fuel and incidences on board. Most people had taken the water. Boats were filled to capacity, and some even more, and they were capsizing. No reports from the coast. The military was scattered. Most bunkers, makeshift installations, and safe zones were overrun. Highly populated areas were quiet. A high-pitched alarm went off over the airwaves, and then a familiar voice came across the speakers. My fellow Americans, it was the President of the United States. To those of you that hear, please spread the word of this most urgent broadcast. As you know, the entire civilized world is under attack by some mutant strain of virus that has turned brother against brother and sister against sister. Our forces have been trying to provide safe zones for survivors and uninfected. My advice to you, if you're not in a safe place right now, is to stay away from large cities. This is where the highest concentration of infected seem to be gathering. Our ground forces are trying to clear out as many infected as possible, but the numbers keep growing, and this leaves me with a very difficult decision. But after discussing it with my Joint Chiefs of Staff, we believe this to be the only way to get ahead of this menace. Hal hollered down to the rest of the group. You guys better get up here right away. At 1600 hours Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, the United States military will strike with nuclear warheads on large metropolises where the infection is at its highest concentration. We are giving any and all survivors who receive this message 24 hours to clear out of the city. Successful and secure safe zones are still standing in rural areas, so please try to make it to these locations. Again, 1600 hours Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, the U.S. military will be launching a nuclear strike on certain large cities where the concentration of infected is higher. If you can, please try to evacuate as soon as possible. Communication with ground forces has been minimal, but we will try to have rescue helicopters available to those in need before the strike. It is with a heavy heart that I bring this decision to you. May God have mercy on our souls. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 14. So we are all caught up. So anyhow, I thought really that this timing, it being just after Easter, kind of fitting because Easter is kind of a zombie story, really, because Jesus coming back to life. He didn't really eat anybody's brains that we know of. So, but anyhow, yes, I hope you guys had a happy Easter with your families and stuff. I had an enjoyable weekend with my daughter and my two granddaughters. I got to meet my youngest granddaughter for the first time. She was born in January. So yeah, it was a good time. Man, it's I haven't raised little kids in a long time, so it was a lot of stuff to try to remember. So anyhow, I thank you guys for coming out tonight, and I really thank you guys for the encouragement that you guys give me when you show up, when you share, and when you comment, and when you react to everything. If you could give some love over at my YouTube channel, and encourage your friends to like my YouTube page as well, and like this page. I am going to try something different next week. I'm thinking about moving this show to 8 o'clock Central Standard Time instead of 9 o'clock, just to have it earlier. Yeah, you guys will have to let me know what you think about that. So I know some of you guys are in a later time zone, so it might work out a little better for you. Otherwise, because some people 9 o'clock in Minnesota is late for other people. So anyhow, I'm just thinking through stuff. So yeah, we're gonna try 8 o'clock for next week and see how that works for everybody. So that you guys can make it out here for the live stream. I know a lot of you check this out after the fact and check it out on YouTube or even on here on the Facebook page. Either way is great. I love seeing you guys, and even if it's not during the live stream and you guys happen to catch this at a later date, please drop a comment. Let me know that you came and checked it out. Let me know what you think. You guys enjoying the stories? Are you enjoying the voices? Whatever. Just please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think, and we'll be back doing this again next week. Tunes for Tuesday on Tuesday, and Apocalypse Humpday on Wednesday, and we are going to be having another What's the Buzz at the Beehive coming up here either next Friday or the Friday after. So I'll have to schedule that with my next guest. Also, I'm going to a writing retreat this coming Monday, and I may do a little live broadcast from the retreat. We'll see how that works out. I've never been to a retreat before, so it'll be kind of fun to check that out and see what that's all about, because I definitely need a quiet place in the woods to get myself together a little bit. So with that being said, watch your backs, keep away from the dead, and don't trust any inky, gooey, black goo that moves on its own, because it might end up in your brain, and next thing you know, you're eating your significant other or your kids. Not a good thing. So thank you, Kevin. I'm glad it was groovy, brother. All right, you guys. Time for bed. You guys get home, or you guys get to bed. You guys are at home probably. So it was good seeing y'all, and we will see you next week. Mwah. Peace out.